everybody. Welcome back to this. I'm your host, Shauna Griffiths. And as always, we've got a great real talk with a real leader who I am literally so proud to have with us today. Before we get into that, though, I'm going to give a shout out to our founding partners, Hijinks Agency, Felicia Hall Allen and Associates, and 6 to 8 Digital. So, as I said, folks, we have an amazing guest today, Meka Morris. Meka, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, I'm excited to be here and excited to have this discussion. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, folks, Meka is the EVP and CRO of the Minnesota Twins, which is amazing. I have to say, I met Meka. I always give you folks context for how I know guests. And I met Meka at the Sponsorship Mastery Summit recently in Seattle. And I swear I saw her across the room and it was like this beacon. And I was like, I have got to know that woman. I was both like in awe of you, Meka, and a little bit like, she's too cool for me.
That is not, you are one of the coolest, so there's no way. But I appreciate that.
Yeah. And then so we had this app, folks, that helped us to navigate the summit and who was there. And I was like, I need to look this woman up. So I read your bio, Meka. Your career has been incredible. I mean, folks, she has had some stops at some of the major properties and organizations. She was a Sports Business Journal 40 under 40. I was actually sitting at the table with Mia Len of the Milwaukee Bucks when I was reading your bio, and I'm like elbowing her. I was like, "Did you see this?" So I'm so happy to have you here. And so I would love for you to share with the audience EVP and CRO of the Minnesota Twins. Give us a snapshot of what your role is and the impact that you're making.
Yeah, it's the first ever that they've hired my role at the Twins, and I believe it's the first ever time that they've really had somebody in their executive team who didn't kind of rise up through the organization. And so it's a really interesting time. It's a really interesting time in baseball, in the city of Minneapolis, and undoubtedly at the Twins. And my role primarily is focused on all things revenue. And the Twins have been a healthy organization that have punched above their weight for years. They've had success, they've won, and they've continued to sort of outkick their coverage, so to speak, to use a football term, relative to their market size versus sort of their, sort of achievements. But recognize that the world has shifted and that the things that are going to make the Twins successful in the future are not going to be the same things that made the Twins successful in the past. And so how do you bring fresh thinking and fresh perspective to push the organization to the next level? You need to bring in some outside thinking. And so that's kind of the role that I play. So I lead the existing revenue as it sits today. We're going to iterate on that to get better. Then we're going to add in some new and innovative and creative revenue streams and ideas and opportunities to help continue to grow the Minnesota Twins business, for the next, decades to come. So it's been, an amazing experience. They are salt of the earth people. The Polad family, our ownership group, is every bit of what you'd want in an ownership group, which in my opinion is the difference between an organization that you want to be a part of and an organization that might be a bit more challenging. So I'm proud and I feel honored and privileged to be at the Twins.
Oh, that's awesome. And you were talking about the innovation side of things and new revenue streams. And I think that was one of the things when you were on stage with Laura Day and you two were having a discussion about that. And it was one of the things that I really perked up and was leaning into, because I think that in the sports entertainment industry, people are always pushing, right? And they're always saying that they want to innovate, but you also have a lot of people who are doing a lot of old school things. Yeah. So can you give us an idea of what's the sort of North Star as you're thinking about innovation and what do you think is going to be important for you to actually get there?
Yeah, innovation, oftentimes people get a little bit their backs up because it feels like elimination or we're going to abandon everything that makes what this is good, right? Or everything that I fell in love with when I fell in love with baseball or football or basketball or whatever the case may be. And that, I think, is a complete misconception.
Mm,
When you're innovating, it's really about two buckets, in my opinion. It's an iteration of what has been. When it's you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just need to make the wheel better,
yeah.
right? So it's still a circle. It still moves the same way. We've just iterated against it to make it better. That's a part of innovation. The other side of that coin is looking at what I'd call the sort of hammocks in the business, the parts of a business that are the least desirable, and finding ways to lean into them to make them more desirable. For
Mm,
example, everyone talks about the length of a baseball game and the length of the season. Of the four major sports, we have the longest season, and our games sometimes can be, the longest games. I mean, you have 9 innings, and those 9 innings can be quick or long, just depending upon what's happening. So the magic, the opportunity in my mind is to lean into the time. The one thing you can't create is time. So we have a lot of time. It's the one sport. If you and I were at a baseball game, we can have a conversation. We can get up and grab a cocktail and not feel like we're going to miss out on some
mm,
action in a major way. And so, why don't we lean into that and find ways to entertain, to maximize, to utilize the gift of time that we have? And so, taking the Achilles heel and really thinking about how you change perception and then iteration on what always has been. So that way, if I'm a core baseball fan who just wants to do a box score and have peanuts, I'm not losing the ability to do that, but I'm
mhm.
also at the same time attracting a new fan that may want a completely different experience at a baseball game.
Yeah, that's so great to hear. And I've not heard someone talk about it that way. It's so great. And especially like, I know that there were efforts, or at least it was, I don't know if it actually carried through, but to actually speed up the game. And so it's actually, I love hearing that. It's such a great takeaway. I think, especially as people are listening to this, I think you can apply that almost in life as well. So it's like, what's not working? How do you lean into it? How do you make it better? So thank you for sharing that. And I briefly mentioned Laura Day, but you two have quite a unique relationship. And it was like, I don't know, I'm going to sound so old. My grandmother used to say this, like frickin' frack. I don't know if that translates, but it was a bit of like frickin' frack, which I think you called ebony and ivory. But
Mhm.
tell the folks about the relationship that you've had with Laura, and how that's played a role in your time at the Twins.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Very rarely in this business, when you take on a role like mine, are you in fact, and I use the word replace, but I don't believe that she's replaceable. I frankly don't believe anyone's replaceable. Um, you rarely are working with that person at the same organization, with knowing that eventually they are going to step away and you are going to try to fill those vacant shoes, so to speak. And so when you're thinking about that, I don't know that there's a lot of people who could operate in that kind of continuum. She and I are more different than I could even express. I mean, she's been in this business for over 3 decades in various roles. She's worked the bulk of that time at the Twins and has built what I'd argue is their sort of revenue business, and has done so brilliantly. And then I'm new coming in. Certainly her junior, but not just in time, in this business and age, but new to the marketplace. We just have very different lives. The least of which is race, right? Which is different onto itself. And so what she and I have built is a mutual respect, and I think it has to start there, and a genuine interest. She is has insatiable curiosity, and we both do. And when you have that, whether or not you agree or disagree, you remain curious about how someone else thinks, about how they see this business, about their perspective and what and why. And while she will help me pressure test ideas to ensure viability and help me identify and see pitfalls that I might not have recognized otherwise, I'm able to push her to say, why do you continue to do it that way? Is there another way? Is that really the best way to maximize that opportunity? Or are we just leaning into the way we've always done it? And I think when there's always this natural and quite frankly important tension between what was and what will be, what you get out of that is something that is beautifully appreciative and paying homage to all the things that she's built and all the things that make the twins great, but also an appreciation for the fact that we need to iterate and grow and develop beyond what we've always been. And she and I found that rhythm in a really amazing way. And I think there's something to be said about how you kind of transition leaders out and transition new leaders in. And a lot of times it's a rip and replace. She's leaving on Tuesday, new person starts on Wednesday. But we miss so much in the gap of not having those two people have to occupy similar space over a certain amount of time to help ensure that you're handing off this amazing part of this business to somebody you trust, because you're entrusting them, quite frankly, not only with the revenue or whatever piece of business, but the livelihood of people you really care about that work within that team. So it's been amazing. She will be a friend of mine forevermore. She is a confidant. She is a supporter. She is a teacher. She is a cheerleader. She has knowledge beyond anything I could ever imagine. Relationships that I envy, and there isn't a person out there who doesn't love Laura Day, which says a lot about her, and something I admire.
Yeah. It was so great to see you two together, just the dynamic. I think that it's so rare, to your point, of seeing that dynamic come together. And I don't know, like the opposite of ego, is what you could like see and feel between the two of you. And that's really hard. I mean, I think that a lot of people, you get to a certain level, a lot of people who have they have thoughts about how women can work together and stuff. And it was just so awesome to see both of you, the way that you truly have this authentic bond. And I'm so glad that you said that, especially for the people who are in the audience listening, about the transition of leadership. And, I think sometimes people think it's easy to like, oh, you got this new role and you step into it and everything's magic. And there's so much in that transition. That was a great thing to point out. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a lot, and I've never had this experience. Often when I've taken on a new role, it was a vacant spot. There was somebody who had left, and they were, looking to replace. And by the time you get there, that person's long gone, and you're sort of, digging through the files trying to figure out, okay, well, what was going on? Well, what'd you hire that person to do? What is their expectation? How are we going to build this thing? I get the benefit of having the person to ask.
Yeah.
Like, why is this set up that way? Well, why did you do it like this? Well, how did this operate before? Is this really the best way? I have another idea. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Where am I missing some things? And there's times where she'll be like, yeah, but you didn't think about this. And there's other times where she's like, you know what? That is a better way to do it. I never even considered an alternative, right? So I think the combination of that can be extremely powerful and to the benefit of the organization, frankly.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think it's like that. I often talk about like literally just setting people up for success. And I think too often we just like people are left to flounder. And even if you're coming in at the senior level, you have all this experience and everything. But again, it's like, how are we actually setting up people to succeed? So also because you're stepping into a role where you're leading other people as well as the organization. So again, just thanks for sharing all that. Speaking of experience, and one of the ways that you and Laura differ so much is that, as you said, she's been in that market for her career, and you've really done the kind of like tour of duty, which I respect and I've done as well. But I would love for you to share, folks, like talk about your evolution, your professional evolution. How's that translated as a personal evolution to get where you are today? Because we were talking earlier, like, you have put in the work over the years to be where you are. So can you shine some light on that for us?
Yeah, it's funny when you start out in this business, you don't know where it's going to take you. And I remember, starting out as an inside sales executive in Cleveland, and back in those days, you had a phone book and a phone, and you called people in the middle of dinner and tried to sell them tickets, season tickets, or half game packages, or whatever the case may be. And you're just hoping for a chance, to you're not really sure what is next and where you're best suited, and you have inclinations and hunches, but you've got to prove it, right? And sales is in my opinion, was the perfect place. Either you sold it or you didn't. Either you hit the number or you didn't. And
Yeah.
it was undeniable in a way that I think really speaks to the competitive nature of, being a former athlete. I don't want you to tell me that because this person's, more senior than I or has been here longer than I, that they in turn are just better than me. Well, who says, right? Like, how can we put and create an even playing field? And selling is a way to do that. So, long story short, um, starting out and sort of really having a natural lean into the sponsorship space and sort of the art of deal making and relationship building. I sort of fancied myself as, hopefully one day a VP of partnerships. That's what I want it to be. And as you grow and go, things and opportunities as you continue to work hard open up for you and to you, and that was really exciting. And then I started to make some transitions, and largely for people in this industry, to grow within the same organization can be really hard, because while the world sees sports teams as these big entities playing on big stages, when you look at front offices, they're they're really small family run businesses,
Yeah.
with maybe 300 or 400 full-time front office staff. Then there's a bunch of part-time people who do some of the sausage making, but ultimately it's a small group. So the next job, if occupied, there isn't another VP of partnerships. There's one that leads that department. So if you're ready for that and that isn't afforded to you where you're at, you have to make the tough decision to wait it out, or move on. And I was somebody who was ambitious, and I'm like, I had no family, or meaning children or a husband, or a partner. So I'm going to move on. And I went and worked in the NFL, and I came back to the NBA. Then I spent some time at Live Nation, and then I went to Legends, and then I went to Learfield, and then I was in some startups, and now I'm at the Twins. And so when I look back, I'm really an entertainment executive. I've worked across almost all entertainment platforms. So the three major sports teams: music, college, attractions, and technology. So when I come into a business, I look at it from a full flush 360 entertainment. How can we entertain and attract? What does the competitive set look like for discretionary dollars? Why might somebody choose to go to an NFL game versus a baseball game versus a NBA game versus a concert versus an attraction? What is the buying behavior of each of those individuals, and how do you
Mm-hmm.
cross pollinate them? So um, it's given me a much more well-rounded view of the industry versus somebody who stayed, you know, strictly in one vertical of this business, or in fact one sport.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's benefit to that, and the sort of deep understanding of a particular team and or business is important to be juxtaposed to somebody with a different perspective. It keeps
Right. Yeah.
everybody honest, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, totally. It makes tons of sense. When you were making those decisions, did you ever have worry, or I guess fear, that you wouldn't be able to get back a certain place? I think that's something that comes up a lot, or people, or it's like you grasp onto the seat. I remember when I was at the net, sometimes I would like come back to my seat every day and be so grateful that the seat was there. It was like I cling to the seat kind of thing. And so I really respect that, the courage, to me, my perception is courage, as you've taken these steps. And I'm curious, like, how did it feel in those moments?
Terrifying. And you would ask people and they would be like, ooh, if you leave sports, you're never going to get back in, like all the time. But, if it's not scary, you're not really doing something important or impactful. And the juxtaposition of that is your trajectory is accelerated, right? So
Mm,
with great risk comes great reward. And there's people who were my contemporaries who moved up for faster. And there's those that are still waiting for their chance, right? And I think we all have to make that decision when you get to that place of what am I willing to risk to get to where I want to be? And if I believe that I'm good enough and that I do the work, the opportunity to circle back will always be there.
mm,
If you're good, right? And so, you know, there isn't, one way to navigate this business. And I think what's interesting is now, if you look at sort of bigger jobs in sports or anybody at a senior level, most sort of leadership that's hiring those is looking for diversity. And that's not just, gender and race and those things. They're looking for diversity and experience.
yeah.
And I'm finding that my colleagues and counterparts who are really sort of tied down to staying with, a particular team or a particular industry or whatever are finding it really hard when
Hmm.
now these leaders are looking for people with diverse experience and they don't have any, right? And so I think there's a world where you can get that. I also think it's noble to say, I'm from Minnesota and I love it here and this is home and I'm not going to leave and chase the dream, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But understand that those that are willing to make that sacrifice, take that risk, and get a little bit afraid may find themselves, at a trajectory that might be a little bit faster than some of the people who have chosen a different path.
Yeah. No, it's so accurate. And it's also as you're saying that, I have to kind of put a mirror up to my background. And I remember at one time we had someone who came in when I was at the Nets, and she came from a completely different industry, and I was at a place in my maturation or lack thereof at the time where I didn't understand that. And so I think if people are hearing this who are younger generation of people coming up, it's like, remember that if you do see someone come in with different experience, that's actually great and opportunity, and it can only enrich you, instead of feeling like, oh, you don't understand the business. It's like really looking at that person, whether they come from a different sport or they come from a different, sort of vertical, to your point, within the industry. I think that it is that new perspective, can bring so much to the table.
Well, yeah, and we've got to stop doing that, right? Like, it's funny. It feels like sometimes people think we like, are doctors curing cancer with some sort of specialty educate. It's like we're selling tickets to a baseball game. And while it's nuanced and there's lots of things about it that are different than selling tickets to a football game or a hockey game or a basketball game, it's selling tickets to a baseball game. It is not that difficult to understand. And if you've sold a ticket anywhere and you understand fundamentally how to do that, the nuances of baseball versus football versus basketball versus a concert versus an attraction are extremely teachable,
Yeah.
right? So I think we've just got to sort of stop holding people hostage by virtue of time served, as
Mm,
though like a 20-year career in this business is is somehow inapplicable to a 20-year career at the New Jersey Nets or the Brooklyn Nets, so to speak. Like there's there's connection there, and there's actually a fresh perspective there,
yeah.
and there's an opportunity to sort of think about it differently. But let's not forget, like, we're not doing rocket science,
Yeah.
like this is not, we make it seem so much more difficult than it is, and it's not. I mean, it is, but it's not. Do you know what I'm saying? So,
Mhm.
we oftentimes, want to sort of poo poo other people's experience because they don't have the same experience as we do, but that is no different than just being discriminatory for discriminatory's sake.
Yeah.
Well, but you don't come from where I come from. Okay, but I'm a human being with warm blood coursing through my veins, and I can feel what you can feel,
Yeah.
even though I didn't come from where you come from. Like, we've got to be a bit more sort of sensitive and appreciative of other people's perspective than that.
Well,
We got to get better as an industry for sure.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I to this day I still find that I have to justify when people ask me like, well, if I get called about something or someone asks me even at the agencies where I'm working now, it's a creative agency. That wasn't my background in a creative agency. It was in
Right.
other places, but there's so much that you can pull on that's applicable that actually enriches and helps to your point earlier about like innovate and iterate. So I think this is really like a good thing for the audience to be hearing, because again, it's like people of all ages and they're trying to figure out next steps. And also sometimes it's like, how do we handle questions like this? How do we handle those moments where
Yeah.
we have to speak to it? So hopefully folks, if you're, as you're listening, any of this can give you things that you can pull on as you move forward. But as you were talking, I started wondering two things. One is, did your as you went along in your career, Meka, did were opportunities more presented to you, or did they find you, or did you really find them, or is it kind of a mixture?
Um, so throughout my career, if I'm being just blunt, I think that opportunities tended to find me.
Yeah.
When I was looking for opportunities, it never worked. It just, I don't know why. I'd get on Teamwork Online and I'd see something that I thought would be awesome and I'd apply and nothing. But, you know, weeks go by and someone would call and say, "Hey, I've got this thing that I think you could be a fit for." I think the world of trying to get into sports has so dramatically changed.
Yeah.
I think their recruiters are doing the bulk of the search, but I will say that they're really digging in the same pool. I mean, it's the
Mm-hmm.
same executives just kind of playing musical chairs a lot of the time, which has its pros and its cons, frankly. But I think networking is critical. I think if people are struggling to move around in this industry or to be seen or learn about opportunities, I would argue it's because their network is too small. Like
Mm,
sometimes going to events that are appropriate for what you do are as much about learning and getting better at what you do as it is about meeting other people who do what you do.
yeah.
When there's a short list, and if I was to call any, sports recruiting firm, if I said, "Hey, I have a CMO job open," they would rattle off a list of the 5 or 6 people that they know straight away. And if I called the next search firm, people on that list would be on this list,
Yeah.
and people on the next firm's list would be. It's because it's very small.
Yeah.
So one, I'm a firm believer that um, experience, whether in sports or out sports, has applicability.
Mm-hmm.
And what we have to determine is, our ability to teach. If you can market a product to a consumer,
Mm-hmm.
you can market a ticket to a fan.
Yeah.
It's just the product's different
Yeah.
and the buyer's different, but the strategy can be really tangential to what it would require to sell a product, right? So, like this idea that somebody who spent 25 years in, let's call it the CPG space, doing marketing for a major brand can't somehow learn and appreciate what we do and bring a completely fresh perspective to it, I think is a huge miss. And so I think we've got to be able to stretch outside of the walls of our industry and the rinse and repeat of this executive at this team is now this executive at this team is now another executive at another team. I think there's just, some of those things are really a lot easier to sort of pull resources externally.
Mm-hmm.
Ticketing is the one area that I think you have to understand and have sold a ticket somewhere before to
Yeah.
lead a ticket selling group. But when
Yeah.
it comes to brand partnerships or marketing or communications or some of the other sort of more I'd call mainstream kind of spaces, I think there's a world where a traditional sports marketer another kind of marketer together are more powerful than
Mm.
a group that's just worked in sports, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. And it's actually in my journey, I started talking about it as passion point marketing because whatever brand I'm working for, if it's a brand that has like that passionate following, that you know how to market your product, you know how to lean into them, you know how to provide that access and experience that they want to get deeper in the wormhole. And so that's the way I kind of develop that language and that mentality around it to be able to talk about how my own journey was applicable,
Yeah.
and continues to be. So that's a great point. um and then the other question that came to me is, in your journey, like, what was the thing that kind of opened your eyes up to that next level? Because again, like, you have been blazing in your career and you've reached levels at a relatively early stage in your career. And I'm just curious, what was that thing? Because a lot of times you either hear people are like, they're stretching so far beyond where their feet are today, or there's people who are like, oh, I'm not ready for that. So what was that like next level kind of aha thing for you?
I had somebody who saw me
Uh,
for the first time in my career. I think sometimes, in particular, as a person of color and a woman, it's not that it's not that you don't get an opportunity or that you don't get a promotion. It's that, like, they're not even thinking about you.
yeah.
Like, you don't even like to be invisible is worse than
Mm.
being told no.
Oh,
You don't want, and I think there was a long time where, I was crushing it and hitting my numbers and doing great work, and then it was never me for whatever the reasons, right? And for the first time in my career, I had somebody see me
mm.
and they said, you're killing it, and let me help you sort of get to the next level. Let me help you position yourself. Let me help you put pen to paper on a potential promotion for yourself, and how you should position it and why you deserve it. And was in this particular person was a part of the team of people who was making the decision about who should fill this chair. And when somebody gives you that confidence is the wrong word, but inspires you to believe beyond what you thought was possible, it ignites something in you that you can't extinguish. And so that happened to me, and she's still very much a part of my board of directors and ecosystem, and she helped me believe beyond. And once you get there, then you start to unlock opportunities to continue to stretch beyond even that. So but somebody, nobody can do this alone, and you need people who believe in you. You need people who are talking about you in the room when you're not there and saying the right things. You need champions, you need advocates, you need support, you need employees that have worked for you that say good things about you as a leader. So all of those things combined is really what sort of shores up a vision for more. And so that's kind of how it came to fruition for me.
That's incredible. I'm literally like getting goosebumps as you were talking through that, because it is so powerful. Exactly those words. It's like you were seen. And
Mhm.
for people who are listening to this, no matter where you're at in your career, like, Meka is leadership. This is what it's all about, people. And if you're younger and you're like, you look for the people, you look for that opportunity to be seen, you look for the
Mhm.
person, and you really lean into that person who sees you. And then,
Mhm.
and for people who are older, like, this is, or further on in your career, excuse me, it is like, that's so important, is to really look, like, to see your people and to
Exactly right.
pour into them. And it's about it, I think it is about that service, and it's about that. I think it's a huge honor and privilege to be able to see someone and
Yep.
help impact their evolution. And that's why I feel so compelled to, and we talk about it so much on this show. So thank you for walking the talk, for sharing it so eloquently. um so So sorry, let me go to, I wanted to ask you about impact. Sorry, my brain kind of went to right to that, and it's going to dip back into earlier part of our conversation, which is about the time that you came in to the Twins and was, I think, relatively around the same time as the George Floyd murder. And I'm curious, when we're talking about impact and leadership, this is why my brain shifted right to it, is, you're not just, it seems to me, my perception is you stepped into a leadership position at a team at a pivotal time, when so many people are feeling vulnerable, and it is a big responsibility to be leading an organization that's a part of culture, it's a part of impact. And so I'm curious how that, especially in the location that you're at, so what's that been like, and how has that played into what you're doing and what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, when I got to the Twins, it was, roughly a year after the murder of George Floyd. And that murder impacted everybody, sports and beyond, right? And so I think it just shed this light on the disparity in our country across the board, and the number of phone calls I received from executives that I had worked either with or for or around, asking, had I experienced this disparity within this industry? And the answer was unequivocally yes. Um, and so, look, one of the things about me is that I run towards the challenge, not away from it. The things that make me who I am, and the things that shift an industry forward, are the things that are difficult, right? It would have been easier to go take a job elsewhere, um, there's a lot less hair on that dog. You're not dealing with some of the inequities and the sort of sensitivities and frankly anger that exists in this marketplace relative to the disparity of people of color. But in the end of the day, what an opportunity to use your voice to influence, to change, to shift. Sports provides a platform that unifies beyond what somebody believes, what they look like, their sexual orientation, what their definition of family is. All those things seem to fade to the background if we're all in the stands cheering for the same outcome as a unified front. So how do you use that to amplify the message of unity beyond sport, right? And so for me, the opportunity to use my voice in that way was as important as the job itself, um, because I hold that near and dear. Like, there isn't a lot of people who do what I do who look like me in baseball, frankly, in sports.
Yeah.
And if you and I had another 10 minutes here, we could probably write their names all down.
Mm-hmm.
That into itself is a problem, right? And so how do we solve? And this idea that, oh, we need to get more diverse is like, okay, that's great, but people of diverse backgrounds don't want to work in an organization where no one who looks like them has ever made it. How do I believe it? I can do it if you've never, in a 60-year history, in a 50, 40-year history, ever promoted somebody of color to a C-level spot.
Yeah.
Like, and you want me to believe that this is a place for me? Hard pill to swallow. So until there are people like me who are in these chairs and helping to foster opportunities for others to occupy these seats, we are going to continue to sort of be a part of the problem as opposed to being a part of the solution. And so it's imperative, it's paramount, frankly, that these conversations are had, that we have organizations willing to sort of look beyond what is comfortable to have some uncomfortable conversations. But that's how we get better. And so, yeah, it's hard. And it's hard to, the city's been through a lot. But it also means that it's going to be a beautiful story of recovery and resilience and frankly, love in the end. And to be a part of that is important, and it matters to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That whole like part of what you're saying is there's something bigger. There's
Yeah,
something bigger that's
100%.
driving you. It's not just being a part of something that's rare, just being, working in sports, as a
Right.
woman, as a person. There's that bigger purpose, I think, which is awesome. And I really appreciate you sharing that. I don't know, we don't have a lot of time left with you. So I want to make sure that we get to, you said it earlier about deal making and the art of deal making. And again, when I was listening to you on the stage with Laura, I was thinking, damn, she must be like just absolutely wicked in conversations, deal making. So I'd love for you to share with folks like any principles in deal making that have really stood out for you. One thing that I remember and I wrote down when you were talking was that you said that I literally still have the exact notebook right here from when you
Oh,
said it. It was never accept no from a person who can't tell you yes, which I was like sitting in my seat, like clapping. But, is there anything in that you can share with folks as we're wrapping up here about the principles of deal making that you really have just used?
yeah. I mean, that's a big one, and I'll get back to that. But it's more, you know, listen first.
Mm,
You know, ask really good questions. I think when you are in sales at any level, you go in ready to sell what you got, right? And it's like, well, no one wants to be sold anything.
mm,
You've got to pay attention to what it is someone's really saying and make sure you're crystal clear on what they need. And if not, ask clarifying questions. And so when I go in with a presentation at any level, I am so clear on the needs of the organization and how I can help them solve them
mm,
that what I present, it feels like a no-brainer. It's like this is going to not only do exactly what I need, it's going to deliver the desired results.
mm,
And when you create a relationship that way, it becomes really hard to decouple. You can't just pull yourself out of it because it's been tailor made to serve the objectives of the buyer. Um, and when that happens and it becomes a matter of price, that's where you get to a place where you're like, okay, if this person's telling me that they aren't prepared to proceed based on whatever the circumstances, my single question is always, are they somebody who could tell you they can? And if the answer is no, then you haven't done your job.
mm,
Until the person who can say yes says no. And the best thing you can hear in any sort of selling environment is yes. The second best thing you can hear is no. What you do not want to do is live in the maybe. And
mm,
there's a lot of people out there who like to be chased by people in sports and entertainment, and they get the tickets and they get the stuff, and their intention is to never proceed, but their intention is to keep you on the hook and keep getting the free stuff. You've got to understand how to be judicious with the giving, but
mm.
also to get them to commit one way or the other, a yes or a no, but to not leave you in the soup of the maybe. And so there's a lot that I've learned over the years, and high EQ is incredibly important. Developing rapport quickly, being likable, where people want to be in a room with you, they want to spend time with you, all matters when you're in the process of trying to get a deal over the line. So
That's
yeah.
so good. Like so many gems that you just dropped there. So thank you. And folks, if you're not taking notes, rewind and watch again, listen again. These are all things I think that are really important. No matter if you're talking about trying to get a new job, if you're talking about trying to get that promotion, I think these are all great nuggets. So thank you for that. And we're gonna wrap up here. But one thing I like to do at the end of these, because we touch on so many things, is if there's one or two things that you want to make sure that the audience takes away from your episode, what would that be?
Just to know that it is anything worth doing is going to be hard. And when it gets hard, that means you're getting closer.
Mm,
And so staying in it and pushing through it is when you'll see the breakthrough on the other side. Never be afraid to ask for what you want, as long as you have justification for why you deserve it.
Mm.
Never be afraid to ask. All someone can do is say no, and no just leaves you right where you are today.
Yeah.
So, and then, look, I think, um, this world is changing, and we need new leaders with fresh perspective who see things in a new and exciting way. So, I'm thrilled and bullish about the future of our industry, about the new people and the younger people up and coming. I think there is a world where this whole thing's going to shift in an amazing way, and I'm just proud and thankful for what that's going to be. So, stay tuned. There's a lot of good stuff on the way.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you what, as I've gotten to know you, I am so excited that you're in the seat that you are and that you are being a part of this change, because it's people like you that are going to bring it forward. So thank you. Thank you so much for our new friendship. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for the impact that you're making, and for coming on today. So folks, hope you had a great time listening, and have an awesome day.